The number of MPs ordered to go into self-quarantine has shot up to 10. The Speaker of Parliament is urging the public not to visit their MPs. Professor Michael Quay has confirmed Parliament is making arrangements to relocate temporarily to the conference centre as part of measures to curb the spread of COVID-19 among MPs. Now, let's connect with Joseph Owoku-Gakpo to learn a little bit more about that. My colleague joins me now on Skype. Now, Joseph, tell us how exactly is Parliament hoping that the change of location will help to stem the spread of COVID-19?
So, as the Speaker Professor explained earlier today, one thing that they've been advised health experts to do is to ensure adequate spacing, even as they sit for proceedings to run, in the light of the fact that there are more than 25 of them sitting at the same time, and the numbers are a bit kind of crowded. So today, for example, he did direct that we should see a situation where even in the chamber, particularly when a lot of the MPs are not around and there are empty seats, when a member of parliament takes his seat, is to ensure that there are at least 2 empty seats between himself and the next MP, as a way to ensure that they are not close to one another and that they are not exactly breathing over themselves and all of that. But he's been indicating that going forward, the conversation around possibly using the Accra International Conference Center, which is a bigger venue, provides a bigger space, is something that is still under conversation, and that if it becomes extremely necessary, they may be forced to relocate the sitting when it comes to Parliament to the International Conference Center, so that then there'll be enough space for MPs to actually undertake their duties. He's also been outlining other measures they are taking to protect MPs. He's been cautioning members of the public at a media briefing a while ago to desist from showing up in the House to come look for their members of Parliament. He's also been indicating that there was a fumigation exercise in the House over the weekend to ensure that all possible microbes are killed through that particular fumigation exercise, and that going forward, he says the health team here in Parliament is on standby. They are taking advice from the medical officials. He's applying the best standards when it comes to the World Health Organization, all as part of measures to ensure that MPs are safe, even as they go about their duties to help the nation deal with the problem with the spread of the coronavirus.
Can you tell us which 10 MPs have been asked to self-quarantine?
But the interesting bit is that this was a question that was put to Professor Michael Quay at the media briefing he addressed a while ago, where he made the point that 10 MPs have been asked to go into quarantine. Another 5 members of staff of Parliament have also been asked to go into quarantine. But he said that he's unable to disclose the details of the individuals in question because it's not good practice. You would recall that last week, that was on Thursday, the majority leader, Osei Mensah-Bonsu, actually disclosed the names of 2 MPs. Nessa Mahama Ture, who is actually the MP for Ayawaso East, as well as another member of Parliament, Dr. Robert Kwanleb, who is the deputy ranking member on the Health Committee, and also the member of Parliament for Binduri. He disclosed these 2 individuals as 2 MPs who are actually going into quarantine. But since the number shot up to 10, and that question was put to the Speaker of Parliament earlier today specifically about who the other 8 MPs are, he refused to give those specific details. But he's been assuring that this is something that the MPs themselves have agreed to do. They are getting advice from public health officials on how to go about it. There is absolutely no cause for alarm, and that he's confident that the said MPs will be safe. But at that media briefing, so he's actually been addressing a media briefing to brief journalists on Parliament's preparedness to avoid the spread, even as MPs continue to sit. We did put a question to him about the measures that were laid out in a memo to him that the minority leader, Haruna Idrisu, actually did put out over the weekend. You recall that when the minority leader put out that letter, it was a memo he addressed to the Speaker, Professor Michael Quay, laying out a number of measures to help deal with the problem and recommending even for the setting up of a bipartisan committee. To quote the Speaker of Parliament, he says, "This is a document that, although the minority leader claims he has sent to him and journalists have published it, it's not come to his table," and that he's surprised that something that the minority leader says are suggestions on how to help the nation get out of this problem has actually come to his desk, but then he has not seen it. But he has been making the point that Parliament is supporting the executive to deal with the problem, and that he's cautious about avoiding any situation of politicizing what exactly is happening, even as they take the necessary steps alongside the executive arm of government to protect Ghanaians generally and parliamentarians specifically.
We saw images of the Speaker of Parliament wearing a face mask not so long ago. Was Parliament advised by scientists on that? Did a scientist tell the Speaker of Parliament to put on a mask in Parliament?
So at the media briefing today, the Director of Health here in Parliament was also present, and himself and the Speaker, as well as other officials in Parliament, are the ones who addressed the media. And the indication they gave was that the measures that are being rolled out, including the wearing of the mask, is coming directly as advice from the head of medical service here in Parliament, in conformity with what they say are standards of the World Health Organization. You would recall as well that they indicated that they are distributing hand sanitizers all over Parliament. That's also another measure he indicates is something that they've been advised by medical officials to do. And he says he will continue to roll out the necessary measures as they are being advised by health officials. There was, for example, a question to him about the fumigation that was done and whether it will be repeated anytime soon or what the plan is. And again, he said that following advice of various medical professionals, they will come to a decision as to when again to do that particular fumigation. So the indication Professor Michael Quay gives, Kojo, is that all the measures they're rolling out, from the face mask that himself is wearing, it's not just him, all members of Parliament are wearing that face mask. Some of it are being distributed to journalists who are reporting from the House in the press and the public gallery. These are all based on advice that they've gotten from various health officials, which is how come they are rolling out those specific measures.
Is there any possibility of Parliament being shut down or being held remotely? You've already mentioned that they are considering possibly using the conference center, but is there a plan for a shutdown if necessary?
Professor Michael Quay, the Speaker, and the Majority Leader and Leader of Government Business, is also the Minister for Parliamentary Affairs, Oseichi Mensah-Bonsu, at that media briefing, completely ruled out the possibility of the House shutting down. And to quote Professor Michael Quay, he says even in times of war, Parliament is supposed to be sitting in order to making legislation and to guide the executive arm of government, even as they roll out necessary measures to help deal with the situation. And so that is something that is being ruled out completely. In fact, there was a question to Professor Michael Quay about how he repeatedly complains about absenteeism in Parliament, which has become an issue today as well. I'm sure we'll get to that a little later. And if members of Parliament feel unsafe and they take decisions that they would not want to show up on the floor because it's too many people gathering and crowding at the same time. Professor Michael Quay virtually dismissed that point about any MP expressing unsafety over MPs congregating on the floor, and made the point that the health officials are on standby. They put in place the necessary measures to help ensure that MPs are protected. So the bit about Parliament shutting down, it's not likely that's going to happen. But just to give the heads up, per the original timetable that Parliament had, they began sitting on the 28th of January, and this particular session of Parliament is supposed to come to a close by the 3rd of April, which is sometime next weekend. So it looks like they're going the full haul until this week passes and next week passes all the way to the end. They're sticking by the timetable that they laid out at the beginning of the year as to when they're hoping to stay in Parliament. When they eventually go on that break on the 3rd of April, MPs are supposed to be away for the next 3 months before they resume. But for now, they're sticking to that wholeheartedly.
Right. Now, there are some members of Parliament who are, well, quite advanced in age. Did the Speaker talk about any precautions that are being taken to ensure that those who are most vulnerable to this disease have some extra care and protection?
Specifically in terms of extra care to the aged, it's not something that Professor Michael Quay laid out. He says the protection plans and strategies that are being laid out applies to all members of Parliament, people sanitizing their hands, people wearing warm face masks when they show up, members of the public not coming around to Parliament, and the fumigation exercise is something that he says is meant to protect MPs generally without any form of special attention when it comes to VAJ. And Professor Michael Kwe remains very confident that he thinks those measures will protect all members of Parliament, and that there isn't the need for ordinary members of the public to panic about MPs and how they are crowded in the House, resulting in them being infected or anything of that sort. Kojo.
Right, Joseph, I want to thank you for your time with us. But before you go, you were saying something about absenteeism being an issue of its own today. What can you tell us?
So, yes, so earlier in the day, the Minority Chief Whip Muntaka Mubarak raised a concern on the floor of Parliament about the House not having the right quorum to work. You know, by the standing orders and also the Constitution, Parliament is allowed to sit when there are more than 1/3 of all members of Parliament present. So when you look at 275, then that figure should be around the 80s in terms of how many MPs can form a quorum for business to actually run at any point in time. And then when they need to take decisions, then there should be more than half of all MPs on the floor. Earlier today, from my count, there were less than 60 MPs on the floor. And around that time, Muntaka Mubarak was attempting to raise the issue. Repeatedly, he tried to catch the Speaker's eye to raise that particular concern about the House not having a quorum. So in the course of deliberations on the corporate insolvency bill, he actually virtually interrupted the proceedings with an outburst. And as other members of Parliament were speaking on the floor, Muntaka Mubarak switched on the mic and was speaking on top of his voice. There was the attempt by the other MPs to actually pull brakes on him. That wasn't materializing. He made the point that he thought the Speaker was acting lawlessly and unconstitutionally, and that the actions of the Speaker by allowing the House to proceed with deliberations, even as they don't have a quorum, is shameful. And he made the point and virtually ranted for close to 2 minutes, even as efforts were made to stop him without him being stopped. So eventually, when he pulled the brakes on his ranting, if I could describe it as such, he walked out of the House. And a few minutes later, all the minority MPs on the floor, all of them followed suit. And eventually, there were just a little over 30 members of Parliament on the floor conducting business. After he did that, the majority leader, Osei Mensa Bonsu, commented on that. He thought that per the rules of the House, when you would want to comment on anything on the floor, you require the express permission of the Speaker, and that it was unfortunate that the Minority Chief Whip did best out and actually handled issues the way he did, and he thought that it was completely out of place. This was a question that was put by journalists to Speaker Professor Michael Kwe as a media briefing about the sort of relationship he has with those on the minority side. And for him, he doesn't exactly have any sour relationship with the minority MPs. He's a professional, and he continues to do his job as a professional, and that's what he would continue to do. But clearly, the minority MPs were unhappy with him earlier today, and led by Muntaka Mubarak, they walked out of the House, and we wait to see what eventually happens. They walked out without returning. The press briefing, we gather, was supposed to have been one that was supposed to be done by both the majority and minority leadership, but the minority leadership were not present at that particular media briefing.
Right. Okay. Well, let's hear from the Speaker himself. This is what he said about the measures being taken.
A number of our people went abroad to do very legitimate business, but the circumstances of the time are such that as they return, we need to take certain measures. They are not punitive. They are protective of themselves, their families, and Parliament and its guests and workers and members as a whole. As we are speaking now, 10 members of Parliament who traveled abroad in these circumstances have been asked to stay in self-isolation for the mandatory number of days. 5 members of staff who also went abroad and came back have been asked to do the same. This is for the protection of all the people here and the unsuspecting members of the public who may also happen to visit the premises for the genuine business that they have. So this mandatory self-quarantine of MPs and staff are in operation right now. We have also, in the interim, advised all members of parliament to sit 2 seats away from each other so that we'll give ourselves some space. As you know, people are required by WHO regulations, etc., not to sit too close to each other, even family members. And we all have to obey in the interest of the public as a whole. We've also embarked upon fumigation exercise. In fact, yesterday, from morning to dusk, the whole premises were fumigated. The Job 600 Tower block annex, the chamber is annex, the speaker's block, the new administration block, Parliament Police Station, Parliament Fire Station, the uncompleted Visitors Center, and all relevant places were fumigated fully yesterday under the close supervision of the Marshal, the doctor, and other relevant officials. We are asking, and you may notice that our air conditioners are rather low here. Normally it's a very cool room, but we are told by those who know better that the warmth is good for protecting ourselves against the virus. So we advise that all rooms should be kept relatively as warm as possible and not to have very cold surroundings as we can. The driver's rest area, the China camp that we have here, and the entire grounds of Parliament have also been duly dealt with. Incidentally, the place is such that we are not cordoned off, and that's part of the issue regarding our advocating having our own kind of enclave that should be secure. So as much as possible, our experts will watch the situation and fumigate or do all that is needed so far as the public is concerned. Parliament does not really ever shut down. In fact, even Parliament on vacation is often recalled to deal with national emergencies. And if we are living in emergency time,
Speaker of Parliament Michael Quay speaking there. Our correspondent Joseph Opoku Gakpo has been bringing us the latest from today in Parliament, and no doubt there'll be more from him tomorrow.